Okay, let me introduce the people that are joining Norman and me here at the table, and then I have something I want to show you one more time. Karen Hall, Superintendent, Maplewood Richmond Heights School District. Thank you for joining us. Also, Edward Johnson, Principal at Brentwood High School, and also a Principal at University City High School is Michael Maclin. Thank you all for being here. I want to go back to a graphic that we have that really kind of sets the stage for a significant part of our conversation here tonight. The discipline gap in Missouri. This is looking at the school year of 2011-2012. Over 27% of African American high school students received suspensions, while only about 7% of white students were suspended. So just picking up on what Norm and I were talking about, what do you see that represents? What does that tell you about what's going on in your school and schools at large?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is a clear understanding of expectations. And do we have the same expectations for all of our students? That is starting on the district level where I sit, and then translated on down to all the various stakeholders that we are responsible for the students. If we do not clearly articulate what we expect of our classroom communities, and if there are inequities, that needs to be articulated and explained. And from my perspective, if we notice that this is happening, it needs to be addressed. Because I know on my level, I go through all the reports every quarter, and I disaggregate according to different groups, race, gender, if they have special education courses, if they're free and reduced lunch rate students. It can be monitored in a way where we can see what's going on and if there's patterns. So yes, it's telling me that there isn't a clear expectation for all students, that we're doing our best to keep our students in school.
So are we saying we need to be a little more gentle with our students? Because I'm sure there are a lot of teachers. We had the gentleman in the town hall clip there talking about how one student can derail the education for an entire classroom.
And I would say to that, Casey, that's a great point, but I would say that even with suspensions, there needs to be a restorative justice piece. The restorative justice piece which can increase accountability but decrease suspensions, and that's correct. One student can derail 400, not just 40, but with the accountability piece and letting that student understand the clearness and what they're accountable for, I think is the key.
Casey, I would add to that. So you want to begin to create a culture that shares that philosophy of restorative discipline, and so that when kids fail, and you can count on that happening, you want to be able to put a resilience plan in place that will allow kids to restore their citizenship the right way in their community, while also kind of more or less mending feelings with a potential victim if indeed something took place where they offended someone in a certain way. But to be able to have those supports in place and those champion teachers and those administrators that understand how to relate to certain behaviors, where they can really speak explicitly to the type of information kids need to hear and be taught on how they need to be sensitive and show empathy to their peers, but also how to be resilient and show grit in those times when they really need to bounce themselves back on track.
So we talked about consequences at the beginning of the show. And Norm, jump in, and anybody, what are the consequences of repeated suspensions for things on that kind of that secondary level that you're talking about? What are the long-term effects?
You're not in school. You're not learning. Right there, that is the biggest consequence. You're not guaranteed the opportunity to have a high-quality education because you're at home.
Are you more likely to get in trouble as you get older?
Exactly.
Or are you more likely to get in trouble post?
Well, the gap, since we're talking about a discipline gap, the achievement gap, I mean, that's a direct correlation. If you're going to talk about certain groups of students that are achieving below where they should be, well, dig a little deeper. What does the discipline rate look like for some of those students? Are they actually in school? Not that they can't learn, but are they in school?
Is this a high school issue, or does it start earlier?
I think it's earlier. It's much earlier. So if you look at the data from that UCLA report, what they said was that at the elementary school level, the city of St. Louis leads the nation in suspensions of kids. If you have kids that are being suspended in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, and losing instructional time, by the time they get to the point, to the third, fourth grade, they are already further behind because they aren't prepared for the transition into that reading to learn period. So you asked me earlier about why I, as a criminologist, am interested. Because what I understand is that in the beginning of education, we're teaching kids how to learn to read, how to learn the fundamentals of school. If they're not in school, by the time they get to fourth grade, where they have to then start reading to learn and being more engaged in the process, the trajectory starts to spiral downward because they've already been kind of detached from the educational situation.
Okay, see how that plays out in the classroom is that when kids know that they're behind, and teachers set this in what in some cases can be an unreasonable expectation for certain kids that they know are behind, it kind of creates this attitude in a kid where the kid does not necessarily present themselves well from that point on. They don't know how to deal with failure, and they need people to coach them on how to bounce back from situations when they happen. If you don't have someone that can really work closely with kids in those moments where they're behind or they're lacking some kind of information that they need to be successful, if you don't have an individual that can relate to them and can really work with them at that critical key moment in their life, that downward trend is going to take place, and from that point on, it's going to be difficult moving forward.
Which I guess goes back to you were talking about the under-resourced schools that might not have the counselor.